All right, time to talk about how to conquer porn cravings. This is one of the most important videos in the entire course, and I'm confident that if you apply what's taught here, you will 10x your ability to quit porn for good. Now, before we start, quick reminder. This video assumes that you've already watched the Frontline framework lesson on the 3 Frontline questions. We're not going to reteach those questions here in detail. What we're going to do instead is something very specific. You're going to learn how to use the 3 questions to respond to porn cravings in real time. Because, well, cravings are where most guys get derailed. And our solution here is simple. When you get a craving, use the 3 frontline questions of what do I want, how can I win, and who will I be to take a better path. Now, obviously, this starts with the first question of what do I want? And to repeat a concept from the prerequisite 3 questions video, because it matters a ton for our goal of getting clean from porn, it's the idea that cravings are not true desires. Cravings are ways to run away from your true desires, okay? So if you treat cravings like they are authentic desires, then you'll get stuck in the trap of either constantly feeling like you need to deny yourself, which is terrible, or you're going to act on an inauthentic impulse. So the goal here is to decode the craving, not suppress it, so you can unlock the true path forward. And that's exactly what the 3 frontline questions let you do. However, before we go any further, I want to offer you a quick pro tip for processing cravings, all right? And that is, if you start getting significantly triggered to use porn, step away from your devices. This could mean you go into another room, it could mean turning your cell phone off, it could be going for a walk, but generally speaking, it's a wise move to initially move away from your device so that you can have some space to work through the 3 questions. Once you've got your questions answered, you're often clear to re-engage with those devices if it fits your plan. Creating this space is especially useful when you're still getting the Frontline framework installed into your life and really running like in a second nature sort of manner. But it's also really useful anytime you're hit with a truly big craving. So just create a little space. And once you create a little space, what you got to do is you got to ask that question of what do I want? All right. And you're going to be doing the heart shift we talk about in the Frontline framework question, where you're moving past the initial impulse, trying to find the true desire. But it's very important and very useful to remember that we've previously outlined 3 types of porn cravings. And those are emotional cravings, chemical cravings, and sexual cravings. If you can identify the type of craving you're dealing with, it will give you a lot of power over the process. So what we're going to do now is walk through exactly how to apply the 3 questions to each type of porn craving. And we'll start with the emotional cravings because they are the most critical kind of craving to learn to manage. They also tend to be the most intense and troublesome and will keep pestering you until you address them. So we always want to check for an emotional craving first. So on to the first question of what do I want when dealing with an emotional craving? When you ask yourself, what do I want? When you're triggered, you want to make sure that you heart shift past the surface craving to try and identify the deeper desire in the moment. And this could be anything, but common examples are maybe you want relief from stress. Maybe you want connection. Maybe you want to feel clear and not overwhelmed. Maybe you want a break. Maybe you want some problem handled. So let's walk through this, all right? Get a porn craving, okay? And you're like, oh, I got to run the 3 questions, all right? And then you ask yourself, what do I want? And you say, oh, I want porn. It's like, wait, no. I got to heart shift past that. I got to go deeper, okay? And you go a little bit deeper and you realize, there's some stress in here about this work project that's hanging over my head and that doesn't feel good. Something's going on here, all right? In that case, porn isn't the desire, okay? The desire is to get that project moving or resolved, okay? And porn is just a way to run away from handling that desire. All right, and all you got to do then, and when you're dealing with this kind of stuff, is just try to identify that core desire. All right, and if there's nothing there, then you're likely dealing with a chemical or a sexual craving, which we'll talk about more in a few minutes. But say you find something, okay, just name what that desire is and move on to the next question of how can I win? And here's the key thing to understand for the how can I win question regarding emotional cravings. And that is emotional cravings do not need to be fully resolved to be overcome. Okay, the part of you that's aching just needs to feel heard, acknowledged, and pointed in the right direction. So if we continue with the example of feeling stress about a project, okay, your how can I win practical options might look like working on the project right now, spending 2 minutes outlining the next steps, maybe putting a focused work block on your calendar for when you'll get to it tomorrow, or anything else that makes sense for you. And while these kind of practical responses are great and ideal in many circumstances, sometimes your path forward is just more of an internal response. But that's still a plan. That's still a method to winning, okay? So, for example, maybe you've got other pressing work you've got to take care of first. In this case, your how can I win would be to make an intentional decision to defer this project that's stressing you out until later, rather than just kind of floating it in there as this obligation, like, oh, I have to do it now. It's like, no, I'm actually going to choose to do it later, and I'm just going to clear my plate of this other crap first. So ultimately, your how can I win for emotional cravings is to offer yourself a practical or emotional plan to address your desire. And remember, it doesn't need to even be completely resolved. Once your system feels like it's oriented to your desire, the craving to escape will start to lose its grip over you. Then, to solidify your plan, just hit it with an appropriate hat shift statement of, I'm the kind of guy who rejects X and embraces Y. And you want to make sure that this supports your character, this X and Y supports your character as a man of action, i.e., I'm the kind of guy who rejects laziness and embraces decisive action. Or maybe if you're dealing with a loneliness trigger and you're going to reach out to a friend, maybe this part is, I'm the kind of guy who rejects self-isolation and embraces connection, all right? Basically, just say this statement as a fully owned choice in your mind and then go take action. So that's the general approach to emotional cravings. Now, let's move on to chemical cravings. The reason we check for emotional cravings first is because if there's no clear emotional trigger present, you're not stressed, upset, nothing seems to be wrong, then there's a good chance that you are dealing with a chemical craving. So just kind of clearing that out first lets you more confidently move into, all right, I'm going to handle this as a chemical craving. And generally speaking, if you don't know what's going on, just treat it as a chemical craving. And the useful part about this is that all chemical cravings share the exact same answer for the what do I want question, right? And that is, you want some pleasure or relief, okay? That's what you want. Basically, your brain is just itching for a hit to feel good. Don't try and fight this or change it into some other thing. Just work with this desire, but work with it intelligently. So if the goal is to get some pleasure or relief, all right, then we got to figure out a plan to do this. And that's what we're going to answer in our how can I win question. And this will involve either giving yourself some kind of pleasure now or making an agreeable plan for when and how you can get some pleasure later. So in the case where it's okay for you to give yourself some pleasure right now, your goal is to shift into some kind of flow or low friction activity and let the craving pass. So good options include going for a walk, getting away from screens, going to sleep, light movement, reading, a small snack, a short break, this kind of stuff, okay? Walks are one of the best ones in my opinion because they kind of create a big psychological shift, okay? But any of those things or anything else you come up with kind of in that vein is usually a pretty solid response to a chemical craving, okay? And getting crystal clear on what your default chemical craving responses are, particularly for trickier times like when you're alone or when it's late at night, when there's bad weather, etc., can be very useful, but we'll handle that in the exercise for this video. But the reality is that chemical cravings do not last forever, and they will pass relatively quickly once you get your energy into something else. Now, to be clear, sometimes you're going to want a stronger kick than the more basic sorts of activities I just mentioned, especially like on nights and weekends after a long, week of work, okay? And so in those instances, maybe you want to order something from your favorite takeout spot. Maybe you play some video games. Maybe you allow yourself to watch something entertaining for a reasonable amount of time. A lot of times when guys try to quit porn, they try and do too much at once. They try to become this, productivity machine, and they try and squeeze out all kinds of pleasure, all right? It's not the right way to approach this, all right? Allow yourself to have some enjoyment, because if you're not having pleasure on purpose, you're going to be getting it by accident through porn. If you realize that you have no idea how to have fun without porn, then that's something to prioritize fixing as you move through the program. Now, another note here. Sometimes chemical cravings will hit when you're in the middle of something and you absolutely cannot take a break. Maybe you're, watching your kids or something like that, okay? In this instance, all you need to do is tell yourself when you can take that break and decide what you will do with it. Knowing relief is coming is almost as powerful as actually getting it. But basically, for the how can I win, it's, walks, breaks, basic needs, and aligned entertainment. And that brings us to the who will I be part of dealing with chemical cravings. And this is all about learning how to embrace an identity of a guy who can have pleasure on purpose. Okay, so like I was saying, good luck quitting porn while being a drill sergeant with yourself. Learn how to be reasonable with yourself while you eliminate this problem from your life. For your hat shift statement, it will probably be something like, I'm the kind of guy who rejects porn and toxic pleasure and embraces proper rest and recreation. And this might feel a little inauthentic at first if you're not used to thinking this way, but as you practice saying this, you start making this statement truly your own, it'll become more and more second nature and it'll start feeling truly good. So that's chemical cravings. Now on to the third type of craving, sexual cravings. Through practicing introspection, sexual cravings will eventually become obvious to you. But, in the beginning, especially when you're still kind of close to porn and you're in the early stages of it, they can be a bit tricky to spot. So, err on the side of treating cravings like chemical cravings until you're pretty certain what you're dealing with is a sexual craving, okay? And it's basically when you ask yourself what you want, it'll be clear that you don't want to escape from some kind of emotional pain. You don't just want basic pleasure or relief. You want sex, okay? And you can feel it in your bones. This is sexual energy, and it's not something to suppress. It's something to transmute. And transmutation is your only option if you're following the recommended hard mode reboot, which requires a period of total abstinence while quitting porn. So when it comes to what you want when dealing with a sexual craving, what you want is to vigorously make love to a woman. But in order to transmute this desire, we need to take that, understanding of what we want deeper. We need to tap into that raw desire to make love, period. Basically, the authentic sexual impulse, when we distill it down, it's a desire for a fruitful, passionate kind of action where you intensely let loose that fundamentally creative masculine force inside of you. The best way to think about sexual transmutation is to see it as the process of making love to life. And for a hormonally typical male who's full of testosterone, this looks like going and passionately engaging in some kind of virile activity. In an archetypal sense, testosterone, when properly aligned, is hero energy. It's designed to drive you to be a hero in the sheets, or, if you can't do that, it's about going and being a hero in the streets, okay? In other words, if you're not impregnating a woman, decide how you want to impregnate reality with your highest will. So when you're filled with a sexual charge and you're not trying to have a romantic encounter, then the simplest way to think of this core desire is that it's the desire to go kick some ass, okay? That's what you want. It's like you feel that sexual urge. It's like, what I want? Well, what I really want is I want to go kick some ass. I want to go make love to life. Okay, that's the desire. And once we find that, what we need to do next is we need to find the target of this passion, and that's when we move into the how can I win question. So the thing to understand for the how can I win question when dealing with a sexual craving is that it's kind of the opposite of dealing with a chemical craving. Like with a chemical craving, you take it easy and go grab some pleasure, okay? But for a sexual craving, you go the other direction. You want to go do something that requires force, effort, or boldness that makes you stronger, better, more aligned, or more fulfilled. Instead of reaching for the virtual status of pretending to have sex, you're going to generate some real status in your actual life. All right, like you want to be engaging your conqueror mode sort of energy. So examples for this might be maybe you go do a workout, maybe you just go do some push-ups, okay? Like, you could go create art. Transmuting sexual energy into art is, a very famous concept, okay? Maybe you efficiently knock down your to-do list. Maybe you go practice some skill. Maybe you go crush some chores. Maybe you go do a good deed for someone. Maybe you be extra social. You strike up a conversation with people you normally wouldn't talk to, okay? Maybe you just take decisive action on something you've been avoiding. But in essence, you're not trying to calm this energy. You're aiming to redirect it. Find something where you're willing to throw your energy into it with passionate abandon as if you were making love, all right? Don't be afraid of discomfort here. Harness the fire flowing through you and turn it into your engine. Once you've identified the target of your passion, finish with the third question, which is, who will I be? And we're going to use that hat shift statement of, I'm the kind of guy who rejects X and embraces Y. But here's the thing, okay? We want to bring some real emotional heat to that statement. Don't mumble it internally, okay? Let it ring and go kick some ass, all right? Masculine energy, it responds to power. So be powerful. Then make the statement true by acting on it immediately. And don't worry if transmutation in this manner seems difficult at first, okay? It's not even necessary to quit porn. As long as you can handle chemical and emotional cravings, you're probably going to be fine. This transmutation is really more something that you want to get super into post 90 days, okay? Because as your energy gets further from porn, the more easily and effectively you'll be able to transmute it. In fact, regaining the ability to wield the power of your masculine birthright is one of the single greatest opportunities present in quitting porn. So with all that being said, let's recap our full process for dealing with porn cravings. So when you're triggered, run the 3 frontline questions of what I want, how can I win, and who will I be? You're dealing with an emotional craving, meaning you find something that, some kind of emotion like stress, worry, sadness, loneliness, whatever in there, okay? Just productively respond to that emotional trigger in some sensible manner, okay? If you don't find anything like that and you're just dealing with a desire for some pleasure, a chemical craving, All you got to do is go take a break or allow yourself some aligned pleasure until the craving passes. But then if you're dealing with a true sexual desire, all right, you want to transmute that energy by kicking some ass and making love to life. And remember, you do not need to solve your entire life to overcome a craving, and you do not need to, eliminate cravings or prevent them from ever happening. They're going to happen. It's normal. It's actually a part of the healing process. We just need to practice our response to them. We just need to truly address and honor the true desires that are present inside of you. Okay? And the rest of the Frontline framework exists to make sure those small wins compound. So practice this, and don't worry if you're clumsy and awkward at first. All right? The goal is not perfection. The goal is interrupting the old pattern and choosing a new path. And in the next lesson, we'll take this further by showing you how to condition these responses so that they become truly automatic. I'll see you there. Booyah.